some creationists argue that Hitler was influenced by Darwinism.
Yeah, they do,
What
don't
do you
they?
think?
Well, you've got to remember at least one or two things. First of all, Hitler didn't believe in evolution, and as Bob Richards pointed out, and secondly, Hitler was certainly not keen on a tree of life which said Germans here, Jews here. So Hitler had some very, Hitler's relationship to evolution generally was not as close as all that. But of course, the other thing is, I mean, people have pointed out, Darwin had very little to do with anything that he never read Darwin. But on the other hand, there was an awful lot of anti-Semitic literature and talk that Hitler had soaked up. For instance, in Vienna before the First World War, there was a huge amount of anti-Semitism and books by people like Chamberlain and others that Hitler had read and did influence him and that sort of thing. So, I mean, I don't want to say that, if Hitler had been able to use Darwin, he wouldn't have used him, but there's no known connection between him. I mean, you asked me about Darwin and Hume. Now, we know that Darwin read Hume's Natural History of Religion. So if you say, as you said to me, what do you think about the influence of Hume on Darwin? I think it's a perfectly good question. And I'm prepared to say, I think there was some influence. Why? Well, because we know that Darwin read Hume and wrote some nice things about him. So, but we have no evidence that Hitler read Darwin. We have no evidence that anybody that close to Hitler had read Darwin, or the stuff that he was reading. I mean, there was a lot of anti-Semitic material that Hitler was drawing on, as I say. And as I say, we now know, thanks to people like Bob Richards, that in fact, Hitler's relationship to evolution generally was a lot more tenuous, iffy, than one might think.
What about the indirect influence? Like, for example, Darwin influenced Friedrich Nietzsche, and Nietzsche influenced Hitler through his books like Thus Spoke Zarathustra.
Hitler read what?
Hitler read Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Friedrich Nietzsche.
Oh, Nietzsche.
Yeah, so Nietzsche was influenced by Darwin, and Nietzsche in turn influenced Hitler. There is some
problem about Nietzsche is that Nietzsche didn't say a lot of these things. What happened was that Nietzsche's sister, after Nietzsche had gone mad, which he did, his sister took a lot of the material and reassembled it and revised it to make Nietzsche look a lot more, social Darwinian than he was. And now, of course, scholars are starting to look much more seriously at Nietzsche and finding that, in fact, Nietzsche was not an anti-Semite, for instance. Nietzsche would have been appalled to think that anything he said led to Hitler, because that wasn't, Nietzsche was trying to deconstruct, to cut things down, but that wasn't what he was into at all. So again, I don't want to defend Nietzsche. I'm not a Nietzsche scholar, but I think that, again, you don't need to go there. There are so many other sources that one can see that would have influenced Hitler. But can I just say one more thing here?
Yes.
In the 1970s, the creationists were pushing creation, the Genesis stuff, as science. Creation science, they called it. And so the big argument then was that it was science. Well, I think the Arkansas trial and people like me and Steve Gould, and not just us, Langdon Gilkey, others, showed that it isn't science, that creationism is not science. So then the next thing in the 90s with intelligent design theory was that, oh, well, it's all philosophy. This was Philip Johnson's argument, that in fact, Darwinism only works because of what they call it methodological naturalism leads to metaphysical naturalism. So it's got nothing to do with science as such. It's all philosophy. And I think we argued that one for 10, 20 years. And I think that by the Oh, the end of the first decade of this century, it became clear that that wasn't really what was going on. But I find it very interesting. The last 10 years have seen more and more the argument that Darwinism leads to Hitler. In other words, Darwinism is wrong because it's immoral and it leads to bad things. So, in other words, I see this as the third, as it were, wave of ploys to put down evolution, put down Darwin. First, that it's science. Second, that it's philosophy. Third, that it's immoral. And I think we knocked down the first, we knocked down the second. I think we're fighting the third, and I think that's wrong too.
Okay.